Good morning, everyone, and I would like to welcome you to this edition of the Two World Podcast. I am deeply grateful to be part of this telecast. My name is Ken, and I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the two co-hosts of the Two World Podcast. First, we have,
I am Barney.
and also,
And I am Jacob.
we hope you will enjoy our endeavoring today to analyze and perhaps entertain a bit about an episode of a favorite program of ours from years gone by called Northern Exposure.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to today's episode because this particular one, Burning Down the House, is one that both Ken and Barney have loved for a long time. And I have never seen it before and I'm new to the series. And so they were really excited, I think, for this episode for us to get a chance to talk about it, for me to get a chance to watch it. And so we're going to have a really interesting discussion that I think not only delves into the episode, but points to larger life questions related to our identity and what it means to become who we truly are. So it's really good to launch out into this. And maybe just to get us started, there are several major plot subplots in the episode. And I just wanted to start really with Maggie's story and ask you, Ken, and you, Barney, what did you think about the visit from Maggie's mom just at the beginning of the episode and the news about Maggie's mom getting a divorce from her dad? I'd love to hear just your initial thoughts from that.
Well, I think we come to realize through the dialogue in the episode, Maggie's mom definitely wanted to come and tell Maggie big news. And the big news in the subplot is that her and her husband are getting a divorce. Um, Maggie is not first on the list to receive this news, but yet mom came in person to lay this out for her. Um, Barney, your view on this, your take.
Yeah, I like how they tied this in with an episode that we've already talked about on the show here on the Soulmates episode. I like how they specifically gave a reason, some context and background for this, saying that this is the reason why Maggie wasn't invited home for Christmas the last time, is because her dad and her mom were spending a vacation together, trying to see if there was something left to save in their marriage. And as Ken mentioned, Maggie was not the person on the list. As the story unfolds, her mom says how emotionally straining it was for her, and when she told her brother, and when she told this person, and then when she told Bryce Adams, and Maggie's like, "Who's that last guy?" And she's like, "Oh, he cuts my hair." So that there couldn't be another person that she hasn't told before telling her own daughter. And but yeah, it we see a lot unfolding from this one visit. We when we first see Maggie talking with Ruth Ann at the store, getting ready for um her mom's visit, we get the sense that Maggie's mom is, she's a perfectionist, and she really values manners, and she likes things to be just the way they are, and she has a routine, and she takes care of herself. She's really conscious about how she looks, um, and Maggie thinks that the only reason she's coming is just to apologize that they didn't have her for Christmas, and she ends up, Maggie just ends up really trouble processing this information.
It's so interesting, just as we're finding out a little bit about Maggie's mom, and you get the sense that she's a perfectionist. When you first see Maggie and her mom together, you understand a little bit more, perhaps, who Maggie is in general, because there's that one part where she's getting out of the truck and her mom makes a comment about her hair, like being so short, and she's like, oh, you don't like my hair, and she gets real insecure. And and then, oh, this goes deep into her childhood, this sense of being scrutinized. And you kind of see it sometimes in other episodes when Joel is critiquing Maggie. She can be a bit defensive, and she has this like rebellious streak in her a little bit too, to buck against expectations of her. So I kind of want to ask, seeing that this I oh the second example before I ask this question, they're sitting in the restaurant, and her mom is not pleased with the glass that she's been given. It's maybe imperfect, or it has some chip in it or something. And so Maggie asks for them to get her a new glass. So yet another example of her mom being unreasonable. But then, as the narrative shifts, as she realizes her mom's vulnerability and struggle, it kind of breaks that paradigm. Like my mom, who I thought always just had everything organized and it followed a certain plan and was very consistent and predictable, and Maggie rebelled against that growing up. Now she sees her mom as unsure and stepping out into the unknown and wanting new experiences, kind of like Maggie had done when she was in her youth. And so Maggie has this paradigm shift to she has to choose, like, how am I gonna live with this new reality. And so I guess I kind of wanted to ask you both to talk a little bit about that, and the change that happens in Maggie through the episode, and as she understands more fully what her mom's telling her. And in particular, there was this part of the episode where it's towards the end. Well, I'm just going to stop there. Please just go ahead from that point.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
certainly. Go ahead, Barney.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think there's when you were talking, the scene that came to my mind was when she's in the bar, and it's just her and Holling talking together, and just like you mentioned, we see her at a crossroads when she says, I've been rebelling against this my whole life, and here she finds out that what she thought she was rebelling against isn't what her mom really is after all. And probably her mom had been just having to put on this facade, I guess, or trying the best to adapt to who she thought she had to be, since her husband is a CEO of General Motors. And yeah, like you said, that's the first start of where Maggie has to decide how she wants to um, internalize what she's learned from her mom in this real short amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, Barney, that's exactly the scenario I was going to bring up. It was a short conversation with Holling, and at the conclusion of it, Holling says something to the effect of, "Well, Maggie, back then, it was all about just surviving." Okay, and coupled with the fact that at this point in the show, it's all about Maggie. It's Maggie's self-pity. It's Maggie's self-loathing. It's Maggie, and that paradigm shifts as we reach the conclusion of the episode. But um, I don't think that's an unnatural state to be in. um, but it's definitely all about me and mom. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts on that. I think that's really helpful. And I'm wondering if we can explain for our audience a little bit more how Maggie's storyline actually is directly related to the title of the episode, Burning Down the House. So just a little bit of context for that. Maggie's mom is visiting and staying with her in her home, and accidentally leaves a damp towel on the space heater. And that ultimately results in Maggie's house being burned down. So the title is very accurate. I mean, the episode does talk about burning down the house, but then Maggie has this amazing, or how should I say, maybe almost metaphorical, deeper conversation with her mom after the house is burned down and they're standing outside. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts from that. Um, she's talking with her mom. Let me see if I can find it. And after the fire, and her mom says, I waited until I was 58 to change my life. Or I think she maybe said, like, burn down my house, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I wish I had done it sooner. And Maggie responds, it was my life to change, or my house to burn down, not yours. Um, and then her mom responds, don't sit in your house and wait for it to burn down. Don't wait for it to come to you. And
Great
so
line.
then we realized, no, this is more, the episode is much more about identity and who we're becoming than it is just about a house burning down. And so, in light of that, this idea of like, who is Maggie's mom becoming? And then in light of this news, how does that affect Maggie? Who will Maggie become? I wanted to ask you guys that question about, and we did some work before today emailing back and forth. And Ken, I really loved your answer to this, but I want to ask it again while we're recording the episode. But why do you think Maggie's mom decided to change her life so dramatically at 58? And and then how would we evaluate that decision? I really loved your response in the email. Like, would we think that that was a good decision for her to make?
Mhm. Well, part of, yeah, great question. Yeah, part of my response is speaking personally, and I'll be brief because this is not totally what we're about, but at age 58, I was experiencing a similar traumatic transition in my life. And as you know, as one who has come through the end of a marriage, I can totally understand Maggie's mom and am sympathetic to her transition when she said, the marriage was long dead, but as long as you kids were around, it was an okay life to be part of. But that has passed, and now, you know, I have made this decision to move onward.
And I really appreciate you sharing that experience because I think like it helps understand the psychology and like for Maggie's character, she can't understand that point of view because doesn't have that life experience that her mom does. But like you sharing your story helps give us a greater window into that. And you said something else in the notes that you sent that I just want to reference, if that's okay. You said, if I'm reading it correctly, we can't really know like to the full extent whether this was a wise decision or not. We kind of have to wait and see how it plays out in her life in the fullness of time. Like after the dust settles and after she lives into the new reality, then she can evaluate, her mom can evaluate whether that was a wise decision. And I thought, oh, that's profound. Like so many times in life when we're at a crossroads, we don't know if the decision we're making ultimately will end up being the best one or the right one in the long term until it plays out more in our life. I just wanted to reference that. I thought it was so good.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, my perspective is I am a ways into that decision, and there's been some very good and rewarding and momentous um, positive things that I've learned to treasure in my life. And at the same time, there's been backlash and sadness that not totally unexpected, but to a degree which I would not have expected. And as Maggie's mom heads off into this big adventure, I think it's in a sense, even though it's a divorce, it's a new marriage of her and her life where there's going to be a honeymoon period here as she heads into this big trip. And then the reality of what is my new life all about? What is my new normal?
Barney, I'm wondering, would you be willing to talk a little bit about that final conversation that Maggie has with her mom at the end of the episode and just share a little bit about what they say? I liked what you said in the notes about that.
Yeah, I like how we see things change a- and kind of progress, and as we see Maggie dealing with everything that she was trying to um internalize, and then when her house is burnt down and she's mad at her mom, and then I really like that scene where where Maggie is, dressed in other people's clothes and has a blanket wrapped around her and is sitting by herself on a bench. And it's so that scene is so wonderfully constructed, um, cinemagraphically, like just the way that it's setup is just beautiful. And then her mom comes and sits beside her, and Maggie says, go away. Her mom just doesn't want to see this, or Maggie just doesn't want to see this person who put her in this state of homelessness. And her mom kind of guides her and explains, as you were saying, Jacob, you hated that house, she said, and then goes into her mom saying, like you said, how she waited, don't wait until you're 58 to burn down your house, But then as Ken so wonderfully put it in perspective for us about her mom being in this honeymoon period and having all these things, she's saying all of these things that she wants to do. And, Maggie says, but you don't even like this. You don't even like that. And her mom says, how do I know unless I try? And then this really sets Maggie's perspective of who her mom is, really changes what she thought she knew about her mom. And then, finally her mom, like Ken said, has this big trip plan that she's going to go on, bicycling in France. And Maggie is coming to terms with this new woman that is her mom, but her mom in a real new way. And she, instead of, being as we see in the beginning of the episode, here is her mom, and she's organizer of spice racks, and she has to have her marmalade on toast, and she has to have her lemon water, and she's really, this is carrying over from the soulmates episode, where she's dreading, in the soulmates episode, she's dreading going home, and now here she's dreading having her mom visit, for all of that her mom brings with her, especially as Jacob mentioned, the criticism and whatnot. And here at the end, what a huge change we've seen, where Maggie sees her mom as this person, and maybe even a little bit of a hero, as someone who at 58 completely changed her life and is doing kind of what Maggie's doing herself, the way that she's living her life. And Maggie just wants her mom to please stay a little bit longer, but her mom finishes by saying, I'm sorry, I'm all booked. And she has to leave. If she doesn't leave Sicily, the trip, the rest of her life, this is a pivotal moment, is going to go on without her. And here she is. This, what better way to spend, like Ken said, here is, she is going in there for her honeymoon period, with just doing everything and anything she can think of. But what will happen, when the trips are done and she's back in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and the dust is settling? Then what will happen? We don't know, but it is a neat way to end the episode. And even before they have this kind of heart to heart, this real connection together, we see just a small tinge of her old mom, when Maggie shows her the shoes, and she says, "Oh, my Ferragamos, you can't beat a pair of Ferragamos." And she's like, "I had one in taupe, and I had one in this color." And then, there's just that tiny bit of tension comes back, where Maggie says, "I don't want to talk about the shoes," and then that melts away when once again they give each other a break, and they see each other as these new people.
That's really great, Barney. And I love how she doesn't want her mom to go by the end of the episode. And but then understands when her mom needs to go. But that's a real change that's happened within her, from being annoyed that her mom's there to wanting more time with her mom. And I think it's maybe a hopeful note too, that their relationship can have more meaningful connections in the future. But I feel like part of the transition to Maggie's new mindset happened behind the scenes of their direct conversations. And I just want to reference it real quick. There's one part of the episode where Maggie goes back to the burnt remains of her home, and she finds Chris poking around in there. And they start talking, and Chris says to her, "We are standing at the center of primordial ooze." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, up from the ashes rises the phoenix. And I feel like in the moment, maybe she doesn't like fully understand what he's trying to tell her. And she gets these shoes of her mom's that somehow miraculously survived the fire, whereas everything else pretty much didn't. But it's kind of like the emergence, that the start in her, the seed of the idea that something good can come from this tragedy. Because, earlier in the episode, when it first happens, she is totally defeated. I think she says, I remember her quoting, let me see if I can find it. I have nothing. I feel nothing.
Oh,
I have
yeah.
nothing. She says right when it happens. But then she gets to the point of talking with Chris where she's like, maybe starting to think, maybe I can, something can emerge out of this, like a phoenix, like I can become a revitalized person. And then by the end of the episode, we see that fruits of that in that conversation with her mom. So I think that's really fascinating. And I also think it's fascinating how that moment has deep connection with the other subplot, another one of the subplots with Chris's part of the story. So would you guys be okay to transition to that
Yeah.
part?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ken, would you be willing to kind of let our audience know a little bit about Chris's endeavor and what he's trying to do?
Sure. Chris is such an interesting character all the time, philosophically, and now we get to see the artistic side of Chris, the morning DJ on the local AM radio station, and Chris has endeavored. And I guess we're given the feeling that he has done things like this before for the town. He's endeavored to hopefully create what he calls a pure moment. And in our notes, I had written, and I'll throw it to you here, in Chris's mind or in your view, what's a pure moment? What what is he what is he after here? And then we can get more into how he went about things.
Well, it seems like to me, I don't know what you would say, Barney, but it's a transcendent thing that overcomes the mundane, ordinary pace and circumstances of life, something that inspires or captures our imagination. And like at the beginning, when he's talking with, I'm trying to think, Joel, he's talking about the right, he's looking for the exact right thing for this moment. And it seems like that type of selectiveness and intentionality indicates for him it had to be something special. There was almost something theatric, performative about it that had to like elevate the experience for people. And he says throughout the episode how the human soul yearns to find expression and art and things that it does. So it feels like there's something within him as well that this pure moment will help release, will help express. So he's trying to do something for himself, but I think he's probably trying to do something for the larger community too. What is your take, Barney?
Oh, yeah. When you say something transcendent, yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think he's trying to create I think, does he mention that he's creating tomorrow's memories or something like that? I think. And yeah, I think he's trying to get like that one moment of something that you'll remember where you were when this happened. And it's something that will never be done again. And it's one of those things that when you see it or hear it or experience it, like it just sticks with you. And yeah, the best way to explain what you just experienced was, wow, that was a pure moment. And I think, yeah, I'm sure that's what he achieved too.
Barney, when
So
you
so
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think you mentioned something really key and important right there to Chris's um, passion and his vision for this pure moment. You said something that's never been done before. And so part of the purity of the
Mhm.
moment is something original and new and fresh. He doesn't want to
mhm,
recycle yesterday's ideas. He wants to find and discover something that's never been done. And so
mhm.
I think that's another part of the purity of the moment he's seeking.
So Chris decides that this pure moment will be to create a large catapult upon which he will attach a live cow and fling it. So Jacob, I've been just waiting for this moment. And Barney as well. With you, Barney, it would be when you first saw it. Jacob, we know it's when you first saw it. Did you at all think that they would actually fling a live animal? I'm playing Joel now, who had a really minor role in this particular episode, relatively speaking. But Joel is aghast at this potentially inhumane act, and wow. So Jacob,
Yeah, I was shocked at because right as soon as they said it was a cow, and Chris is so nonchalant about it. He's just his face is straight and kind of like, oh yeah, of course, like that's a perfectly reasonable idea. And Joel's asking him these questions, and um, yeah, there was definitely some shock value. I thought, oh my goodness, yeah, that is pretty radical. But in Chris's mind, it doesn't seem so um, so radical. Why is that? Why isn't he not more? Um, I don't know, animated as he talks about it, or but Joel certainly makes up for him, and I I want to hear Barney's thoughts on this, but I just have to say a side note. I think it's so funny and ironic that um, Joel is going on and on about like the cow and safeguarding the cow, and then Chris starts drinking milk, and then he offers some milk to Joel, and Joel's like, "Oh no, I don't touch this stuff." And I just thought that was so ironic. Like here he is saying all this stuff about cows, but then he won't even like partake of the cow milk. It's just a kind of funny, comedic, ironic flip there. But what do you think, Barney?
Yeah, I think I remember thinking that also being surprised about the cow, that it was going to be a cow, but then um I guess Chris's character or whatever, when he said, "Oh, well, we'll have a big feast afterwards," I thought, "Oh, yeah, okay, well, that makes sense." And I think that you know, I think that we do get the sense that Chris has done something like this before, because when Joel brings this up to Marilyn, she's not surprised about it either. And she said, well, we could give it something, we could give the cow something, and again, Joel says, a few times, doesn't this disturb you that this poor defenseless animal is going to get hurled hundreds of feet and break every bone in its body? And, well, we'll have a feast, so
mm-hmm.
all for the
I
sake
really,
of art. Yeah.
I really thought they might come when I first saw it, right up to the moment of the cow is on the catapult, and then there would be a philosophical moment where Chris would sermonize on how his thoughts have transitioned into wherever they would be now. Or I thought they might fling it a little ways, like into a pond, and the cow emerges. But I thought they might take it up to that point because that's that show.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering, would you say a little bit, either Barney or Ken, about how Chris's plans get changed? And we know Ed has some relevant information about this whole enterprise. And so could one of you share about that part of the plot?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Chris is spending a lot of time by his trailer, but he's also spending a lot of time in a barn. And people come in to visit him. Shelley comes in to chat with him and ask him what he's trying to do, and he explains a little bit more about that. And she realizes that art can be expressed in a lot of different ways. And then Ed comes in, and Ed thinks that maybe he has the perfect cow for Chris, and Chris says no, he's already found the perfect cow, black and white, and which represents the opposites, yin and yang, and how could it be a better cow? And then Ed thinks, oh yeah, that's just like the one in Monty Python. And either Ed's character or the writers, they so I love that movie. I've watched it many times. They actually got it backwards. Ed said that they flung the cow at the castle wall, but it was the French people in the castle who flung the cow at Monty Python's groups.
Fâchez le vache. Fâchez le vache. What? Get the cow. Oh.
Yeah. At King Arthur. Right. Yeah. So other than that, that like kind of took me out of the moment a little bit. But then yes, it all comes crashing down on Chris that it's done, it's over. Someone's already flung the cow, and then we see later on when Maurice and Shelley and Pauline are having a serious conversation to just about anything, and Ed tells him the news, and Shelley says, "What? They flung it without me?" So everyone had been looking forward to that. But now Chris is at a crossroads. Chris doesn't know what to do. And of all people to get him out of that funk, it's Maurice who gets in there and gives him a real pep talk, really kind of gets him out of that funk. And Chris doesn't know what he's going to fling, but he realizes it's still worth it to pursue this um, artistic project that he has.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I
Eh,
love. Oh, please go ahead, Ken.
Well, yeah, I don't want to lose the thought here. And as Maurice is talking to him, guys, and says, "Don't feel sorry for yourself. You got to move on." Chris says the line to the effect of, "Every creation is an act of destruction." Do we adhere to that?
Hmm. Well, it is interesting, like on a basic level, when you look at mediums like paints or clays or um, I'm trying to think of other physical expressions of art. But anyway, you take a substance in one form and you heat it up or you mold it or you spread it out on a canvas. Like you take one um, quality of one substance existing in a certain way and you change it and alter it into another. So in that sense, I think he's right. Maybe that's not your goal to change. That's not what you're after. You're after more the result at the end, but there is a process and a journey with using those mediums. And so I think in a lot of ways that's true. Like the other phrase I keep thinking of, it's within cooking, but you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Like there is a element of like you take one substance and then you mix it together and you cook it and it becomes something else. So but but I think your question's provocative, because there is a reading of that statement that destruction is a very loaded term. So like when it's applied to flinging a cow, I'm just going to push it on that example.
Okay.
An animal rights activist could say like, I don't think your artistic destruction is merited in this circumstance. You know what I'm saying? So like, I mean, I think one could say that like there could be moral limits to what we will say we're willing to do in the name of art, to create art. Or so when you say, do we abide by that? I think maybe to a point. Like if you're talking about spreading paint or making an omelet or something, that's one thing. But if you're talking about something that could bring harm to a person or a creature or something in the name of art, then I think there's a bigger like moral or ethical question we have to wrestle with. But what do you think, Bernie?
Yeah, maybe not to get too philosophical, but I think that it probably is an accurate way to put it. Like even thinking of something like a landscape, the artist is probably spending so much time with this image that in a way is kind of destroying it by taking away some of the purity, some of the original inspiration, because you can't just get it painted perfectly the first time. And so the artist struggling through getting this onto canvas is kind of a way of it's kind of an act of destruction. And then depending on the result, that and when we view it, if we're familiar with um the subject as well, it kind of destroys how we are seeing. It takes away the purity a little bit out of how we have seen this subject as well, because we can't ever see it again in the same way now that we have been influenced by what we've seen this artist representing something as. So in a way, that kind of there's a little bit of destruction that has happened in the production of something new. Here's this new art piece of art, but what it took away from us and from the artist as well. Not to get too deep into infer
Mhm.
too many things, but I wonder if maybe that's a way of looking of applying that idea to how art is created too.
Oh, well, thank you. That was quite illuminating. I really, truly nice work.
Thanks.
In terms of where we are in the script for the program, I think the next scene is Chris goes to Maggie's burned down house, and there's the destruction, and creation comes from that, and their use of music, always astounding. And Chris, in the midst of the debris going over the piano, which, we can dismiss the fact that it remarkably still plays
Yes.
decently well, um, starts to tap out as time goes by. Brilliantly done.
Mm, mm. Yeah. And is it okay to talk a little bit more about the lead up to that when Maurice goes to see Chris and kind of seeks to pull him out of his depression? And he reminds him about the dedication and tenacity of Michelangelo while he was painting the Sistine Chapel. And the paint was dripping down into his face while he was up there on the platforms, holding up his arm for hours a day. Um, and he tells Chris, like, if you encounter an obstacle, you go through it. And he just reminds him of this need for resilience, and even refers to Maggie, whose home had burned down, and what she's going through and how she's coming through that. And that maybe gets us to what you're saying is the next scene in multiple ways. Like, it helps Chris like look within and say, that's right, I wanted this pure moment, but like, how much am I dedicated to it? Am I willing to go persevere through hardship? And then also it makes him think of Maggie, and it points him to what ultimately is the answer, which we find, like you said, in the next scene. So, and that is the point of convergence, I think, between his story and Maggie's story, when they're there in the ashes of her home, like he says, the primordial ooze, and she starts to find redemption. That process maybe begins for her. She thinks of that as a possibility, but then he, in a very real way, finds redemption for his artistic journey that he's on for this pure moment. And so, would you talk a little bit about that, Ken? Like, you mentioned the piano. What else does the piano become for him in the story? He plays on it, but then it also, just for our audience, how can we explain to them what else he does with it?
Well, he starts to transition, I think, into not so much concentrating on what's to be flung, even though the piano seems to fit the bill for him, but the process of the fling. Is this his? Is this his one of his the Kierkegaard quotes where it's the process of becoming rather
Yes.
than the actual act? And I don't know if I'm hitting your question, Barney, or Jacob. Barney, maybe you can help out here.
The self, if I can just repeat that quote
Mhm.
real quick before Barney's answer, the self is only that which is in the process of becoming.
The self, okay.
Yeah. So, like, the true part of who we are is revealed in this journey of emerging, which is a total description of what's happening in Chris in the episode and Maggie. And we'll find out later when we get to Joel's segment what is happening with Bob, just Bob. but
Bob.
but please, Barney, if you would respond Ken's question, if you like.
Yeah. I, I I wasn't quite sure. I'm not sure if I can respond so well to it, but yeah, he when he sees this piano, then in the midst of all of this destruction around him, and it's been burned up, and um it's he's finally found, for whatever reason, this thing that he's ready to fling, to put in the catapult. And he never he ne- of all the first part of the episode, he is concentrating so much on finding the right cow. I don't know if he said, but like, maybe it doesn't have a good moo, or one person said, I've got a burned out, a used up, a dried up jersey with a bad disposition, or this one's too brown, or this one isn't too small, or this one's whatever. And it took him so long to find the right cow. But then we see that maybe he was intended, maybe he probably even felt the same way, that, kind of like when you're trying to, we kind of use the round peg in a square hole thing, maybe he's so caught up on this cow thing that maybe he realized the reason why he couldn't find the right cow is because he wasn't supposed to fling a cow to begin with. And then we see in Maggie's house that he sees the piano, and there's no doubt in his mind that that's what he's been looking for to fling the whole time. And whether it's because of the weight or what happened to it, or um, that, from this burned down house, something will emerge from it to create a pure moment, then whatever it is, he doesn't need to explain it. I guess he doesn't explain. Maybe he can't explain it, but um, yeah, there it is. And then at the very end of the episode, when everyone's cheering, he just says, he has the last line of the episode, and he says, "Yeah." Like that's exactly
And
what he wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
it,
And even Maurice, as they pan to each of the major characters during the fling, even Maurice kind of acknowledges in his own way, all right, there's something going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I might have a tiny bit of intuition about this.
yeah, I I agree with the two of you. I was really captivated by like the response of the audience as it's after it's flung and it's flying through the air, and you see them in awe looking
Mm.
upon it. And so I went back and listened again to what each person said. And so the first person said, "That's interesting," and another one said, "Yeah, it's," and it trails off. And then another person says, and this is Maurice, "We'll all be."
Oh, yeah, I thought that's what he said.
"We'll
Yeah.
all be." He's surprised. And then you're right. At the end, Chris says, "Yeah." What a satisfying way to end
Hmm.
that
Mm.
episode for sure.
Mhm. And knowing Maurice's character as we do, I think he possesses enough pompousness to say, I had a big part in this, and it's
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah. Right. 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 Right.
I got him back on track.
Yeah. And we
Uh,
see it's interesting to see Maurice really appreciating this, because in the episode we talked about previously, or another time, the Aurora Borealis, Maurice is spending the whole time trying to figure out what this sculpture is, and he just can't grab a hold of it. And when someone says, "Well, I don't understand it," and then Maurice thinks he's found a kindred spirit, but then the other person says, "But I like it," and then Maurice is back to the drawing board, and then back to square one. But then here, Maurice really got it. Chris, wow, he created a pure moment that even Maurice can find some awe and inspiration in this.
As we're kind of coming to the end of this subplot, and before we launch out into the next one related to Joel, I just have to say, like, I feel like one of the subtle themes of this episode, it's very subtle, very small, but it's there, is like our struggle, the human struggle with perfectionism. Like you said, Barney, Chris is looking for the perfect cow. I know when Ed tells him about Monty Python and the search for Holy Grail and the flinging of the cows and that, and he's real discouraged, he says something like, repetition is the death of art. And he has this idea, he's laboring against, he wants to do this original thing, and he has this perfect notion. But then something about the other theme of emergence and becoming, and like the process and the journey, once he focuses on that and less on the perfect, like Ken said earlier, finding the perfect thing to fling, then he understands why it's important to persist. And then the parallel to me is, like as we were saying earlier about the perfectionism of Maggie's mom, and that her mom regrets later in life not being different, and how, like, maybe in a very subtle way the episode's saying, like, watch out for those expressions of perfectionism in our lives that get us focused on the wrong thing, that keep us from really becoming who we're supposed to be. That there's that
mm,
French phrase, maybe you've heard it before, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And sometimes in being so focused on being perfect or finding what's perfect, we miss all the good things around us. And so anyway, I just wanted to put that subplot in, reference in, before we move on to that next
okay.
subplot with Joel. So um,
Yeah. Thank you, Jacob. For me, it wasn't subtle at all
mm,
because of the kind of person I am,
mm.
and sometimes I need reminders of just let it happen. You don't need to try to micromanage every move along the way here. For it, it did strike me, and thanks for really bringing that to light.
Absolutely. Um, would either one of you like to introduce our third subplot about Joel and the chimney sweep?
Mm.
Yeah. When we were getting ready for this episode, I thought I knew it forward and backward, and I thought, yeah, it's about the catapult, it's about the house, and that's it. And then when Bob comes in, I had the reaction just this last time I watched. I thought, oh man, it's this one. Oh, this is why I love this episode so much. This episode is a work of art. It has to be framed and put in a museum somewhere. There's no
Mhm.
way that this could be in this episode. It's the perfect episode. And yeah, there's Bob, where I forget Bob drops by the office by the clinic to get Joel's keys because he has to clean out Joel's chimney, and Joel can't get over this sense that he knows who he is. Haven't I seen you before? And Bob, no, did, did I treat you for his thyroid or something like that? No, I've never been to New York. What about Camp Indian Head in '78? Were you there? No, I just can't figure out why I can't place you. I know I've seen you before, Joel says. And then yeah, thanks to everyone, like, Joel asks everyone else around town, do you know, does he look familiar? No, he's just Bob. Bob who? Just Bob. And then Holling says, he did a heck of a job on our flue, So whoever he is, he's a really accomplished chimney sweep and really is doing a great job. And then Joel happens to pick up his mail at Ruth Ann's store, and he gets Golf Digest, and I get to learn everything I already know about the Ryder Cup, he says. And it's like 4 months old, and then it clicks, it dawns. That's where he knows this guy. Bob is Larry, Larry Coe. And Larry Coe is such a good name for a golfer that I actually, when I watched this episode, like the first or second time, like I searched it up, there must be a real Larry Coe. Maybe he's not just an actor, maybe he's also a golfer. And there isn't. But just such a perfect, even getting the name of a golfer, I can just picture there being a Larry Coe out there. And of course he has a mustache too. And yeah, and poor Bob, poor Bob, who had this heartbreaking experience in his life to have a 3-foot putt to win the Masters, and he blows it. And oh man, I probably would move to Alaska or somewhere to change my life too after that. And um, you know, Joel did his best, when he said, "I know who you are," Larry, I know who you are. And then he does the best he can to say, wow, that charge at Pebble Beach, wow, when you were playing there, and what a great thing. And then, Bob, of course, has to acknowledge, well, I bet you saw the Masters, and of course, Augusta National, it's my favorite course. And yeah, and then Bob says, well, then that's it. I've got to move to Greenland or somewhere, because he just can't handle what he went through. He still isn't over that heartbreaking loss. And um I also felt bad that, Joel, the one of the tenets in the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. And here Joel goes and tells everybody he knows back home that here's Larry, he's cleaning chimneys. And without asking Bob, without asking Larry if it's okay to tell people. And but maybe that was tough love. Maybe that was, in a way, I think it showed Bob, Larry, that he's still remembered, he's still relevant. His golf career, people still know who he is. Maybe he blew that big tournament, but people still know who he is. And they still, if you talk about Larry Coe, yeah, they still know he was a really good golfer. And then he, in that way, he goes along with Joel's, I think he called it like psychobabble or something like that, Joel's idea to recreate that missed putt, and give Bob the chance that probably even Joel himself some chance at some redemption, Joel, to see kind of this hero of his. Maybe he was this fan. He was a fan of Bob's to Larry's to make that putt, and then Larry the chance to, who knows, the psychodrama, I guess is what he called it, to get another shot at maybe making that putt that he knew that he could make, and he just blew it.
It's interesting.
As to
Oh, please go ahead, Ken.
oh, well, as to the relevance of that subplot, which seems on the outside very separate from the rest of this particular episode, um, I found that golf is not a team sport, even though you are competing, and even though there's a level of competition. Really, a lot of the competition is within yourself. And whatever happened to Larry on that 3-foot putt, I can't imagine his state of mind before striking that putt to be in that position. And you're supposed to make this. And so the juices inside his being, he's I don't know, most human beings are a nervous wreck. But in that sense, he is competing with himself, and there's this internal struggle akin to Chris's internal struggle about creating this artistic moment. And and he doesn't and Larry doesn't succeed. And Barney, when you were talking about looking up the name Larry, I didn't, but I know I follow golf a little bit back in the day, and there's a Larry Mize.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I just thought maybe they subconsciously, a one syllable last name sounds like a golfer's name because there was a golfer's name. And yeah, so that entered my stream of consciousness as well. Um, and then I think, Jacob, you asked the question in our notes about what Joel did. Yeah, Barney, I think some tough love involved there, and I'm going to make this right for you in this certain way. And then he sets up the astroturf and the 3-foot putt, and Larry makes it. And the question is, was that redemptive?
Yeah, it's so complicated because
Man.
Larry says after making the putt, "Do you feel better now?"
Yeah.
And Joel responds, "Yes." So Joel feels better. I don't know. Did Larry feel better? Did he have a little smile on his face? I'm trying to remember. It looked like he did.
Yeah,
Um,
there were two things I noticed. He had a small smirk, and then he did another practice swing. Even after he made the putt, he right at the very end of the scene, he does one more little swing with the putter. So it made me think, yeah, he remembers what it feels like to play golf, and he still likes playing golf. And so I wondered if maybe it really did change maybe his had plans to go to Greenland and decided not to go there again, I think.
And those responses helped me to. I really thought no redemption at all. I really did because of what he said to Joel.
Yeah,
But the
feel better.
nuances the two of you noticed really helped me. Um, I have a follow-up question on this. Why would Larry agree to this, to do this? Why would he agree to stand it? What if he missed? Why would he agree to do this?
That's a great question. And I think because he's been spending all of this time and effort and energy running away from it. So why wouldn't he just because he was in his truck too, just put the pedal on the metal and just get out of there and tell Joel, forget it. You're, this is just a bunch of psychodrama that I don't need it. You make the putt yourself. I'm not part of this. But what was it? What was it in his heart or in his mind that told him maybe he could give it a try? Maybe he always really was so desperate for one more try, but was too scared to take it on to the tour, where he knew that he'd be on TV again or in real competition again.
there's maybe as another follow up to that. Two other sets of quotes from the episode that connect with this to me, and one is when Joel is talking with Holling about Larry. He says, "You don't walk away from golf." And so I don't know how true this is in like the worldview of golfers, but it seems like he's saying this is something that's deep in your blood. It's deep within you once you get that invested. And so maybe Larry's running and continues to be running from part of who he is. And so this is like a moment of decision. Like, even though he doesn't seem to want to do it and it seems inconvenient, he doesn't seem to be into it. Maybe there is some element of truth in what Joel was saying. Like maybe part of him wants to, re-engage a little bit. But then the other quote was, um, Joel asked Larry what happened when he misses the 3-foot putt. And he says, why did you miss the putt? What happened? And Larry responds, there is no what happened. And I think that's interesting because like maybe Larry's worldview too is one of he's not fatalistic. He just kind of sees life as like a blank canvas or like a potential for good or bad in any moment. There's no larger grand scheme. It's just what happens. And so maybe I don't know. I'm reading a lot into that quote, but maybe he's willing to roll the dice because like, part of him wants to re-engage and like something good could happen. I mean, there's no bigger complex thing at work here. I guess I'll just act. I don't know. Those are just my, I'm grasping there, but those are just some of my thoughts based on other things said in the episode.
Yeah, I love that second quote. Yeah, he says, "What happens?" And Larry says, "You want to know what happened?" And then at that time, I think, oh, he'll tell us. He had a bad grip, or the blade of the putter was facing the wrong way, or what. And he just goes, "I don't know what happened." And wow, yeah, and wow, so he doesn't even know what happened, how that happened.
Right.
Maybe that's another
Yeah,
reason why
we're certainly
so.
left to speculate a lot. Second place in the Masters is certainly not the end of the world for a lot of golfers. Um, but he walked away. And then, Jacob, as you asked the question, another speculative one, certainly, but what happens to Larry? Because he's definitely going to pack up and get out of Sicily. What happens to Larry next? What's his path?
Well, like, if you have Chris's optimism of the Phoenix, like hopefully there can be some new discovery for Larry. But I guess Northern Exposure does seem to kind of present people's choices and free will as relevant to their stories. So I guess he'd have to choose that. Like Molly's mom made a choice to seek something different, but she could have chose to remain. So I guess it'll be up to Larry, what he chooses. But I don't know if I tend to be an optimist and hopeful that like this moment could contribute positively somehow in Larry's own emergence, following the language of Kierkegaard that Chris quotes, emerging into his true self, which maybe is not a golfer. Like maybe he finds something else. Maybe chimney sweeping is enough, but maybe there's something else that he loves and he can walk away from golf. I don't know, but what do you think, Barney?
Well, yeah, just when you said mentioned about the phoenix emerging from the ashes, what does the chimney sweep surround himself with? But the ashes and dealing with fire where fire belongs. And so maybe
Yeah.
this is a pretty redemptive story about Larry too in that way then. And that
Wow.
just dawned on me when you mentioned that.
Wow. Barney,
Wow.
that's a great connection. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
absolutely.
The writing
Whew.
on this episode, there's so many levels of meaning. And it's
Oh yeah.
what was this season or this episode nominated? I remember hearing that or reading when we were getting ready for today somewhere that it was nominated for like some certain award for dramatic writing. And I mean, the show has a whole litany of nominations and awards that it's won over the years. But I think this one was recognized this season, or this one was recognized as being exceptional. So, um,
Yeah, I have I have Darren Burrow's book here, Northern Exposed. So he was Ed, and I just thought I could share a little bit of
Oh
what
yeah.
he wrote from the Burning Down the House episode. So he says, I have just a few selections. He says, I don't know where they got the idea, but this was the high point of originality for the whole entire show. He says, certainly that season.
Mm.
And he makes a point of saying that the trebuchet, catapult, but trebuchet, he says it wasn't CGI. So I think, this day and age, some people might see it and think that it was just constructed, but it was, someone from England has this giant trebuchet that they used in the show. And maybe not to kind of pull the curtain back too much, but he says that they were worried that somebody or something might get hurt or broken or injured when they did the trebuchet. So they actually recorded everyone's reactions first. And he said that um, they had a big stick, and on the end of the stick was a red flag, and they just waved it in an arc this way and that way, and told the
Oh,
cast to just follow the red flag to get their reactions, pretending that they're seeing it go. But let's see. But then he describes how it was, and let's see. Before that, he says that I think that moment epitomized for us, the cast and the crew, the way that we felt about Northern Exposure. We never felt like we were making a TV show. We were doing something that felt like something you couldn't put a label on.
Mm.
And I really agree with that. And then let's see if I can get it. That oh yeah, he says about the actual fling. He says no matter how fabulous it looks, and how much you like it on film. And he says, and it does look fabulous. It was much, much, much in all caps, more impressive in real life. But he does say the one good thing about seeing it on film is that we get the chance to see it from the different angles. I think that he said they flung something 3 or 4 times, and I think he said that the first piano like imploded before it even got off of the trebuchet because the trebuchet had that much force to it. But you get the sense that the cast and crew all experienced a real pure moment when they saw it in real life, and that we're so fortunate to have the chance to have experienced that as well.
wow, that's just a fascinating insight, and bring the book back some more
Yeah.
to have that point of view. I I often sit and wonder, like an episode like this, what went in the can? What got thrown away? Did they all right, let's have Larry miss the putt. And how do we take it from there to I it's just amazing that they have to do this a number of weeks in a row. And I mean, wow, this was like a movie production that oh man, amazing. Thanks,
Yeah.
Barney, for that. That was
Thank you. Yes, I agree. That was fantastic.
cool.
Yes. So, are there any other questions or thoughts that either of you would like to share before we close our episode?
I really enjoyed this one, guys. I always enjoy being with you, but I learned a lot by listening to your insights, particularly on this one. And Barney, what a great choice for an episode. Oh, I, thank you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I have to say too that as many times I probably can feel the same way as many times as we've seen this episode. It and as many times as I think I've seen and understood everything that there is to see and understand about the episode, it's not until having the chance to talk with both of you in this setting that I can really gain even deeper, greater understanding and appreciation for the show. And we are glad for you listeners out there and those of you watching along on YouTube that you guys let us into your homes for a little bit. And we hope that you enjoyed hearing us talk about this episode and the themes and what we could glean from it and the insight that we got from it, as much as we hope that you enjoy as much as we do for sure. And likewise, we hope that you are looking forward to the next episode as much as we are as well. And so for today's special episode, dealing with Northern Exposure, the Two World Podcast, we have Ken and also Jacob, and I am Barney, and we thank you very much, and we'll see you again next time.